I want to put it to you this evening that there is something really rotten in the state of British television today. Really rotten. Bad enough to threaten the production of the quality television we've rightly been proud of for so many years. I would argue that this rot has grown and spread, and I think we haven't stopped to look at the damage that's been done and is being done. So what is it that I believe is threatening British TV? It is, in my mind, the elevation of the status of commissioning and commissioning's mission creep into all aspects of programme making. It is the growth of an uncreative crust at the top of television, efficient and effective mainly as a transmitter of fear of failure. And behind it is a pseudoscience which promises the impossible, the illusion that there is a way to guarantee that everything we make will be a hit. At its worst, this malaise results in contempt on one side, commissioners towards producers, and utter loathing on the other. So how have we allowed this to happen? Television's supposed to be fun. Now working in the industry can often feel anything but, not fun, not creative, not collaborative. It is, I'd suggest, a road to ruin. I don't want to suggest there's no role for commissioning. There are many, many instances where it does all work perfectly. The commissioner champions an idea, helps it get commissioned, makes sure it's properly funded, makes sure there's enough time to produce the best possible programme, supports the production through the ups and downs of the production process, helps manage on-screen talent, adds expertise and insights along the way that improves the final film or show, and then helps it get the profile, the marketing and the slot that it deserves in order to give it the best chance of success. And all the while not taking credit for themselves or rubbishing the production team. It can happen, does happen. But that is a world away from the everyday reality many producers have to put up with. Stories of a senior commissioner driving around with a stack of unwatched DVD pitches in the boot of his car, unanswered emails and phone calls, viewings organised and then cancelled, arrogance, high-handedness, ignorance, lack of empathy, experience, or just plain common sense. These things aren't actually qualifications to be a commissioner. It's not them as people, it's the culture that has grown up around the way commissioning works and what is and isn't acceptable. And producers just have to put up with it. Protest? You're difficult. Argue about the programme? You don't get it. Complain? Do you want another commission? This is not about bad people or even about the wrong people. I myself ran the BBC's biggest commissioning team for a year and a half. In many ways, it was very enjoyable. When you have commissioning power, or the appearance of commissioning power, life can feel good. Meetings don't start until you turn up. You're the centre of attention. Earnest note-taking accompanies your every half-assed comment. But it's true. People bring you cups of tea. They're nice to you. And best of all, they laugh at all, and I mean all, of your jokes. Glamorous industry figures take you out for lunch. I don't think you ever did, Grant, but you know what I mean. You mix with the brightest and the best. Desperate small indies send you presents. A huge salmon arrived for me one Christmas. You make speeches, people clap, they ask your opinion. It is you who can make them rich and successful. You have the keys. You know the password. It's you. It's very seductive, very insidious. I really thought my jokes were funny until the day I stepped back into production. Production. The poor, ignorant suckers who, without the wisdom and insight of brilliant commissioners, would be floundering in their own hopelessness. Of course, these schmucks are the ones who come up with the ideas the ones who actually create the programs, the ones who put their necks on the line, the teams who organise themselves, budget themselves, travel long distances, track down and convince contributors, stand in the cold, sweat long hours in edits, people who make the damn stuff. And yet in today's television, they're all too often relegated to the role of the can-do-better schoolchild, frankly hopeless without the wisdom and firm guiding hand of the brilliant commissioner. So how has it come to this? There was, as those of us who were around will remember, there was a huge shift in the 1980s. The arrival of the indie sector, the impact of Channel 4, the breakup of the old fiefdoms at the BBC, and the end of the cosy cabal of regional ITV companies. In most ways, this increased diversity opened up opportunities and encouraged a flourishing of creativity. I'm not arguing it was a golden age when producers ruled supreme and channels just had to suck it up. No doubt there were some crap programs made back then, just as there are now, funnily enough, in spite of the ever-growing army of commissioners. But significantly, out of this upheaval in television also, I believe, came the seeds of today's malaise. Channel controllers became far more powerful. And as the big barons of production were vanquished, so their powers were assumed by the channels. In the end, in the 2000s, almost all the strands with devolved editorial control were killed off, and the centre took total control of what was produced, even in Channel 4. This control needed two things, I think: a theoretical basis and an apparatus. The theoretical basis was built around increasingly sophisticated audience research. Audience research has moved from being very crude, viewers sat at home writing down what they were watching on clipboards, to today's digitally precise, measured consumption. And this kind of research and information is also very seductive. If you think you know everything about your audience, then surely you can devise programs that suit them perfectly. You can guarantee success. And if it isn't appearing to work, then maybe you just need to know even more about your audience. And this can become an obsession. I remember the thrill at TV Centre when the audience dial machine arrived. Channel controllers could go up to a room, I think on the 6th floor, and watch second by second how an audience responded to a programme. If people switched channels as the programme got underway, then the opening must have been wrong. Tell the commissioners to tell the producers to make sure the first 30 seconds are really gripping. Maybe put all your best stuff there, come on. And before long, oh, come on, give it to me, I'll do it. You see where this is going. So we get the rise and rise of a hitherto obscure role, the scheduler, the masters, mainly but not exclusively men, of the dark arts, the ones who understand audiences so well they can bring success to even the most clueless channel controller. Like the trusted advisors in a royal court, their power can be enormous. Surprising perhaps in a creative industry, because these people have almost to a man or woman never been involved in making a programme. But never mind. It's not they we should blame, and nearly every one of them I've met has been a lovely person. But they are the purveyors of the theory, the pseudo-science, and we see in television in this period the rise of the geeks. There's a new truth. If only channel controllers could have complete control of every programme, then all would be well. But of course, they cannot. Even the most superhuman of this admittedly awesome bunch of people need a bureaucracy to interpret and enforce their diktats. Backed by the theory that audience insights are the key to success, and the channel controller is the owner of this wisdom, then all that needs to happen is for those slow-to-catch-on types out there making the stuff to get with the programme. If only they understood. If only they'd listened properly. If only they weren't so slow on the uptake, stuck in their ways. If only they'd do what they were told. Do I exaggerate? Only in part. I have sat in far too many meetings. I've been part of far too many conversations with people at the top of British television not to conclude that the cleverest people in television are controllers and commissioners. So many times I've heard tell of rubbish films turned into stonking hits by the genius of the commissioner. So-and-so spent days in the cutting room turning it round. It was a complete mess until we got stuck in. I made them completely recut it. It would have been a disaster. You hear it all the time in a place like TV Centre. And incidentally, they can talk like this because there is hardly anywhere in British television where channel controllers and commissioners actually sit and work alongside producers. Although there has, as a lot of people know, been a disastrous attempt at a bit of this in Broadcasting House, with hilarious results, with a commissioner shouting, "Do you know who I am?" at a runner who was trying to find a pencil, resulting in an intervention by human resources. Generally, commissioners can claim anything about the rubbish shows they've turned around because they're constantly reporting up, maybe through several layers, but nevertheless up. But why, and we should ask ourselves this, why should commissioners routinely rubbish the producers they work with? Well, for one reason, it justifies their roles. But do you have to rubbish your colleagues to do that? Even the most egotistical football manager would stop short of saying his team were utterly hopeless until he turned them into winners, even if that's what they thought. But that's where we've got to in TV. There must be more going on here, though. Working in commissioning is now the quickest and most effective way to the top in TV, not programme making. And if you can portray yourself as someone who regularly turns dross into gold, well, that's not going to harm your chances of boosting your career. And just to rub it in, they now also often take a credit on programmes as commissioners, not exec producers, which is fine, but as commissioners, building their careers on the backs of other people's programmes, and I think that stinks. Commissioners don't make programmes, production teams do. No wonder the industry can feel an uncreative and often miserable place. The reality is that the layers between the programme-making talent and those taking the decisions about what does and doesn't get made have continued to grow. And just as importantly, the shared experiences, the priorities, the shared reasons for even being in the industry have grown further apart. Sometimes it feels like we're even losing our common language. The bureaucracy that now services channel controllers is quite surprisingly large. It's quite a regular sight in Television Centre or now Broadcasting House to see a BBC channel controller sat in a meeting with maybe a dozen advisors and apparatchiks, and not a single one of them, sometimes including the channel controller, has actually ever made a programme. That may well not even include the commissioners, who themselves are kept at arm's length when compared to the closer advisors, the schedulers, the audience researchers, the spin doctors and other assorted bureaucrats. But the commissioners can put big numbers in the field too. Well, ITV, where arguably some of the most interesting stuff's going on at the moment, there are only 5 people commissioning Factual, 6 when Richard Klein arrives. At Channel 4 there's something like 29, even though Jay Hunt actually makes all the decisions. The BBC, I've counted an incredible 54 just involved with commissioning Factual. And that doesn't include Open University or worldwide commissioning, let alone the Scottish or Welsh setups, or indeed the channel controllers themselves. That's an awful lot of people having to justify their existence. After all, they don't actually make the programmes. So how can they keep busy? Well, they can do the function they're supposed to. They can help producers understand and respond to the requirements of the various channels. They can seek out and promote the best production talent and ideas. They can add value to productions by providing insights and experience. They can develop strong, trusting relationships with producers. And this still does happen, but only in some cases. And it merely scratches the surface of the reality of the typical producer-commissioner relationship today. Because as the numbers of commissioners grew, so did the level of interference in the actual production process. And my argument is that is all part of the pseudo-scientific approach, the essentially uncreative theory that risk can be eliminated and that an idea kicked around enough will end up in a shape that is guaranteed to succeed. And that's what's going on in Charlie Brooker's piece. Hence the growing almost routine demand that for an idea to even be commissioned, it first has to be presented as practically the finished item. Scripts, details of every contributor, what each contributor will say, even though they haven't said it yet, the opening in detail, even though you haven't cut it, and so on and so on. It's costly, it's soul-destroying, and it's frankly ridiculous. In fact, it's an approach that only makes sense to people who don't actually make programs. People who don't make programs telling people who do make programs how they should do it. And if they really think they know best about everything, in an extreme case, they may end up in the bedroom of a presenter, going through her wardrobe and picking out what she should wear on a shoot. It's a true story. And when the shooting has been done, we get to the endless cuts and recuts made for the commissioner, contradictions, about turns, only to find some superior commissioner or the channel controller has a completely different version they want. This may even have been the version you were cutting in the first place. It's costly and it's severely damaging to the producer's creative confidence and indeed mental health. And while it's ludicrous, the serious side of this is that in a culture which elevates the commissioner to some sort of minor god, it's actually seen as suicidal to make a fuss about their behaviour. Who's the channel controller or the TV boss going to believe? The version of a commissioner that they see every day and work closely with, or a whinge from a disgruntled producer unknown to them, or maybe known only by a reputation created by reports from commissioners? Indies regularly hemorrhage money, twisting and turning in response to the whims of a commissioner, or waiting for their responses, or for a meeting, which never seems to happen. But if you complain, well, commissioners may not in the end actually decide what gets made, but they have an almost equal power. By being in a position to sift and select ideas and choose producers, they can at least decide what does not get made. And if you think about it, that's a very big thing. It's a real power, albeit one that's entirely negative. But in any case, everybody knows this whole edifice is based on a falsehood. It's rarely the commissioners who commission. Nearly everything is actually commissioned by channel controllers. So the decisions on what to commission are at best taken at arm's length, mediated by a layer of commissioners between the program making talent and the broadcaster. And as channel controllers and commissioners are increasingly drawn from non-program makers, we have an institutionalized lack of empathy, and often even a lack of basic understanding about what it's actually like to create shows. The distance and layers between program-making talent and channel controllers is now a real obstacle to any meaningful creative dialogue. When I suggested recently in the BBC that channel controllers should change the way they work to re-engage in direct relationships with producers, a senior channel controller slapped me down for suggesting the wholly unrealistic. Channel controllers are, I was told, far too busy. It's taken a few months for that comment to reverberate around my brain, but now it seems so obviously wrong-headed that it's formed the basis for this talk. I'm of course saying things that would amount to career suicide if I had any intention of staying in the industry, but I don't, so here it is. We've come to accept as normal, inevitable, that channels can no longer develop personal and trusting creative relationships with their producers. They're too busy. That's why you need layers of commissioners to conduct the relationship. That's why you need commissioners to explain precisely what you want for your channel, because you are too busy. And so we come full circle, with the channel controllers apparently reaping the results of their centralizing of control. They end up too busy to run the whole process, so they accumulate their army of commissioners to do that for them. And in so doing, they've broken the creative link between channel and producer. This distancing, which was highlighted last year in a brilliant BAFTA lecture by Armando Iannucci, which you can see online, still around on the BAFTA site, is a real threat to creativity in British television. Why should young talent put up with a bureaucratic, dead-handed process? It's often a process controlled by careerists with less talent than themselves. And if they have no chance of direct contact with the real decision maker, then they could go direct to the audience now in an increasing variety of other ways. We can very easily drive creative talent away from television and speed up its current trend to being less diverse, more conservative, and just plain less exciting than many other forms of media. We've created a self-justifying, ever-expanding monster that needs to be stopped. So that's what I was proposing in this talk. A complete destruction of the current system and a new way of allowing a direct and creative relationship between those who decide what is made and by whom, with a direct relationship with the creative producing community. If this is truly too complex to be done by single channel controllers, then they should devolve to commissioners, to strand editors, even to producers. They should allow diversity, defy the pseudoscience, take risks, surprise your audiences, surprise yourselves. You never know, they might just work. Thank you.